This is a Heart and Hand production.
Hello and welcome back to Tactics Talk Bitesize. I'm your host Adam Thornton, and we're back with another small show. Weirdly, right after another Scottish Cup win against lower league opposition. Not the time you'd think there'll be loads interesting to talk about tactically, but here we are. Joining me once again is Ali Bain. Ali, how are you?
I'm great, thanks, mate. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you for joining me. So, the reason for this video, I guess, is something the manager said, as it is with most things, given Michael Beale loves a bit of chat. So, following the 3-0 win against Raith, he was asked how big a plus it was to have players back like Yilmaz, Haji, Suter in the team. When discussing John Suter specifically, he did go to pains to say he's a player he always wanted us to sign when he was here as an assistant manager. As a footballer, he likes his passing range, and he did say something we will look at with a back three with John if he can stay fit and we can recruit another player in that area. So with that in mind, we thought it'd be quite useful to show what that might look like, given everything we know so far about how Michael Beale wants Rangers to play. So we'll have a bit of a look at how we currently build up play and how we think changes to the personnel and changes to that shape possibly might allow us to do something a little bit different in certain games. For a little bit of context, in 18 games so far, Rangers under Michael Beale, Rangers haven't played a back three at all. Something we saw in Europe under Van Bronckhorst. Very rarely domestically. I think there was a few games, maybe to close games out. I remember a Hibs away game where he brought on John Lundstrom to play in the back three, and we kind of closed the game out. I might be mistaken, but I think we only actually saw it once during Gerrard's time as well, that 3-3 game at Fir Park early on in his first season. Probably why we never tried it again, given how well that went there. So there is a bit of context there. However, in those 18 games, Ali, Rangers have faced a back three in just 7 of them, with teams electing to go with a 4-man defence more often than not. Maybe it makes sense, I guess, given we don't always play with 2 up front. Sakala tends to float a little bit, as does Ryan Kent. What I did find interesting, though, Ali, was in 11 of those 18 games, the other team have played with 2 up front. Maybe a little surprising, given the narrative sometimes that teams kind of want to just sit in and not attack us. Any thoughts on why teams might be doing that more with us? Is that because we're playing a back 4 and we'll have our fullbacks quite high, almost as a kind of way to try and block us from passing out?
I think there's a bit of that. I also think if you look just, again, the sort of geography of the field, we've spent predominantly, a large part of the game in the opposition's half. So those distances to try and get midfield runs, to try and get movements from deep are obviously pretty far. So having 2 guys up there that can naturally sort of split the workload, if you like, and maybe when they're facing the ball, we're coming at the back, that's the moment they sort of, one up, one off, or the sort of range that are vary their positions. But I guess this is always the balancing act when you're a defending team coming to Ibrox, is you don't want to have too many players back that you're literally just defending, but at the same time, if you're leaving too many people in a sort of non-defensive position that are up front, then obviously, Rangers have got the ability to pick you apart. So there's been a big talk this week about, obviously, the type of strategy we come up against. I know you've mentioned there, obviously, the systems that we face, but I think the strategy is becoming the harder part, where they're slowing the game down, right? There's longer between restarts, so goalkeepers messing them around with the ball, and throw-ins taking an age, free kicks taking an age. I think that's the bigger problem for Rangers right now, and how we get over that. So getting ourselves into winning positions earlier. And I think that'll be the big challenge for the staff, is that when the ball's in play, how can we maximise that time? So let's say the ball's in play, 65 out of the 90, right? And we've got 70% possession. What are we doing 70%? Can we get more out of it? Can we get more crosses? Can we get more shots? Can we get more attacking, final third entries? All of those things the staff will be constantly looking at, and obviously it'll be evolving. And you've also got the other piece of a lot of the same managers have been in this league for a long time. So regardless of whether they bounce around the clubs, it's a very samey, teams are up against as well. So, it's hard to evolve your own style when you're coming up against the same thing pretty much every week, even though it's a little tweak in the numbers.
Yeah, I think regardless of the formation that we play, the tempo needs to be higher, because you're right, other teams will slow it down deliberately, so you almost need to go higher again to combat that. I think that's a big thing that I think you can see players coming in with just that natural more energy, like Raskin and Cantwell. For one, maybe Yilmaz as well coming in that have that, they feel like they have that ability or that need to play a little bit quicker. Hopefully that can just naturally improve as the weeks progress. Okay, so I think we know that most teams play a back four against us, then, given what I said earlier on, and we know that they play two strikers against us. It's maybe not always a 4-4-2 in this way, but just for ease, we set it up in this way. We've used Raith Rovers. That was the last game. I think they set up as a 4-5-1 pretty much in the first half, but it did sort of go to a bit more of a 4-4-2 in the second half, although, as Ali said, that can change depending on the different phases of the play. So, Ali, I thought it might be useful just to look at, I guess, where we are just now. The team that started against Raith Rovers, and we've got a Raith Rovers team there lined up in a 4-4-2. Ours is in this kind of lopsided, I'm not really sure what we can call it in terms of a formation just now, but a back four with sort of two central midfielders and then a bit of a diamond four at the top. In terms of where we are just now, then, in terms of how we build, I want to give us a quick run through of what we think we do more often than not here, what we do with the centre halves, the wing backs, how we kind of get the ball forward to allow us to get into those attacking areas.
So I think the best place to start would be on the left-hand side. This seems to be the area of the field where we're predominantly building through, or certainly trying to create a sort of basic overload shape, right? So a lot of ball entries. Obviously, the centre backs are splitting in the first phase, so going the width of the 18. Barisic obviously is going into the opposition's half, not as perhaps high as that maybe we saw him under Gerrard. Tavernier probably a little bit higher on the weak side, given that we've now got a higher diagonal ball that we can hit on the opposite side if we have to switch it. Typically, the ball movements have been in through Lundstrom into central midfield, either maybe out to Davis or directly out to Barisic. And what we're starting to see from Raskin is those forward penetrative movements in the middle. So those movements into what we call the half spaces and those sort of inside central spaces are interesting, because predominantly under Van Bronckhorst, you'd have had Kent obviously right out in the touchline there, so there would have been those natural open spaces. With Beale, there isn't, so we need to get creative how Raskin then finds those spaces now. So if Kent starts more in a sort of inside position, that allows Raskin to make those forward runs. Or if those movements aren't able to happen, that it's just a simple ball movement. So if you move Kent over just slightly over to the opposition's fullback there's now an ability to basically keep the ball in those positions, right? Is just basically move the ball and drag the opposition across to the ball side. So Cantwell maybe scooching over a little bit as well underneath the striker. So again, now there's that overload piece. There is more players on the left side than there are the right? So now like I say, drags opposition across, gives us more ball movements. But at the same time, now you've got Sakala, you've got obviously Cholak can go at the back post, you've got Tavernier can attack the back post. So again, it creates a sort of diagonal line of attack that you can attack from the ball side, but we've got numbers on the weak side should we need to go through there. That's a typical build-up pattern that we've saw a lot since Beale came in.
One thing that I've been Sakala seems to get a lot of focus for how he plays, I guess, sometimes in terms of how erratic he can be, but when he's good, he's very good. As we've seen against Hibs, it wasn't perfect, but all that space for him to run into an attack does that very, very well. In the Raith Rovers game, a couple of things I noticed that weren't great for me was almost on that opposite side then. So if you've got maybe Tavernier with the ball here, you've got maybe Cantwell on this outside. Cholak dropping a little bit deep, maybe too deep. I think you've got a point on that in a little minute. But what we kind of see here, which I wasn't really a fan of, was Tavernier playing these balls into Sakala, who's back to goal. It's not the one for me with Sakala. I think when he gets that ball in back to goal, he isn't the type of player to maybe turn and face up someone and try and go past them or have a quick change of pace. He can do it, but that far from goal, it never really seems possible. So it sort of limits, I think, the attack when he does that, and all he can really do is pass the ball back the way to Tavernier or to Cantwell. So finding ways to maybe get him attacking when he's not got his back to goal in games where we've got lots of possession, whether that is getting the ball in these more central areas for Raskin and trying to get Sakala to move in terms of timing to thread the ball through. I think those are the things that I'd like to see us look at if we did look at a change of shape, because I think that limits us a little bit. And the other thing to your point that you're hopefully just about to raise is if we look at the second goal, I'll try and very roughly do this. I'm not sure if it was Cholak or not, if this beats my point, but if we look at the second goal that we scored, yes, it's the deflection. Yes, it's pretty funny that it goes in from the way that it does. But when Tavernier plays that ball in that area, there's only one player in the box. I think it was Cholak. My memory's escaping me on it. I think it might have been Cholak. There's only one player in the box, so that cross that's going in, little bit of a bad decision, I would say. That's the same on the other side for me. I know Barisic's put a number of really good crosses in, but sometimes there's not really a thought. It's just, I'm going to get down this line, I'm going to ping in a great ball, and we'll see who's there. In this situation, maybe it's better to try and get the ball into the centre and play that way. Obviously, it results in a goal at this point, but getting men into the box, I think, is something that if we were to look at a change of shape, Ali, it'd be something that we would hopefully look to do a bit more often.
Well, I mean, you're spot on, mate. I mean, I think getting numbers in the box clearly is going to give you a far better advantage of scoring the goal just for proximity of distance, right? You're putting a ball into an area that you're closer. I also think within that, though, that there has to be an understanding of, within recruitment, of where and how we put the ball in the box. So, for example, if you go onto YouTube right now and you type in, Cholak's career goals, for example, a lot of them are headers inside the box. So the sort of easy math here would be, well, if we just put the ball in the box loads of times, this lad's going to go to the end of one and he'll score. I think what we've saw for us is, though, this, I guess, is the frustrating part. Yes, that's the case. He gets goals inside or has got goals inside the box, but not when the defence is stood inside the 18-yard box and there's three around him, right? So it's how do you pull people away? If we're not going to directly use Sakala to build the game up, which, to your point, mate, is obvious then why we're going down the left a lot, is that they either don't trust him to build on the right or they just don't think it's his skill set, which, again, is totally cool. I get that. But then inside the box, he needs to do more, whether it's a front post run, maybe comes in, checks out, pulls centre-backs away, so then it allows Cholak to isolate, it allows him to find runs at the front post, runs at the back post, in tandem with the movement that Sakala's done. A lot of the times I feel the ball goes into wide areas and, it's the tail wagging a dog. It's, okay, well, the crosser now decides where the ball goes next. Well, that's not how you score a goal. A crosser's finding runs. A lot of the times our guys are stood still and they're not able to, again, whether it's through ability, whether it's just through, a lack of understanding or a lack of ability to use the space, we're just not doing enough to get on the end of a cross. And then goes back to your earlier point, obviously, about Barisic. He's got it in his head now that he has to cross to a certain area, and there's no deviation from that whatsoever. Very rarely will you see him whip a low ball into the front post. It seems to be predominantly a back post area. And by the way, it's a lovely cross, right?
I know. There's no getting away from that, absolutely.
Right. And there's only so many times you can listen to your favourite album, right? You get sick of it after a while. So I guess this is the point we're at now, certainly with our wide players, that I don't necessarily think there has to be a change of shape to engender more attacks, but there has to be a change, right, of what they're doing, clearly.
And I think as football fans and as fans anyway, when you think in that way, or you think how do we get more goals, you naturally do draw your mind towards let's change formation, don't you? It's just one of those things. Let's see what we can do. So we're going to ride that, and we're going to give it a go. So, this is purely because of Michael Beale's comments. This is not, myself and Ali are not massive fans of three at the back. It has to be said, certainly when, as Ali outlined, you've got 60 or 70% possession. However, that being said, I do think there is something interesting here, and I'm keen to get Ali's thoughts on it. So let's see if I can do this without causing too many issues on the tactics pad. If I change this to a 3-5-2, I'm going to have to, it's obviously done something I didn't want it to do. So I'm going to bring on Tillman because I think that suits the argument, and I'm going to take off Borna, just for some of the reasons that we've outlined, and just because Yilmaz is someone that we think possibly might be better suited in terms of skill set here. I'm going to bring on Suter, and I'm going to take off Ryan Jack, and that's probably one of the key points I think in this that I would like to look at. So Ryan Kent, no, you're not playing right centre half. You are here. Okay, so haven't positioned the attackers deliberately, as we'll come on to that at the minute. So
we've got one more to take off, mate. Sorry.
Oh,
one more. I'd love to play with a 3-5-3. That'd be awesome if we could play it.
Who have I not got? Sorry, I've got someone. That's what it is. Right. Okay, so we'll take off. Yeah, you're right. I do have one more to take off. I was getting excited there. I was like, oh, good. Yeah. Never mind. Okay, so I've not positioned the attackers in the kind of logical way at the minute. We can kind of come on to that. A back three here, Ali. I think if you were to say paint me a back three in terms of skill set, you want a left footer who's very comfortable on the ball, can bring the ball out, has a great range of passing. You want a John Suter on that right hand side who has a physicality that maybe Ben Davies gets criticised for, so has that balance there. Is equally as good, if not better, I would say, in terms of that longer passing range, comfortable on the ball, decent turn of pace. And then you've got Golson in the middle, who I would probably class as a kind of mix of the both, or certainly the best all-rounder there, almost acting as, we want to call it a sweeper, we can, but that sort of central centre-back. That skill set alone, regardless of game situation, game scenario, that as a back three seems quite good in terms of skill sets to me.
Absolutely, all complement each other. Obviously David's being left-footed helps. If we look at if we take for a second, let's just figure on the ball, right? Let's look at that first. Then having the three guys obviously there in starting positions, you don't encounter those issues that you run into when you play with, let's say, a back four and a midfield three, where you're asking a midfielder to drop in, and those movements and the time it takes to do that. You just got three guys there. So immediately when you're building the ball up, you've got more angles in which you can attack through, right? Now, again, this is when you start to get at the strategy of this and the numbers of all of this, yes, you get more angles in which to play through, but there are always going to be a positive and negative. There are never absolutes, obviously, in football. So when we talk about this, guys, it's with an understanding that we're trying to approach it from both sides. So the major positive in possession, there's more angles in which to build up, there's more diagonal opportunities, there's more ability to split the lines and switch from left to right, and also play those vertical passes. But obviously the major one being you're now playing with one less in the front end in which to play forward into, right? So I guess this is a trade-off we're going to look at here, because a lot of times when we talk about formations as Rangers fans, we're thinking it's still 1995, right? So when we say a back three, it means three Richard Goffs, and that's not the case here. So, for example, Suter and Davis are more than capable of defending in wide areas, almost as fullbacks, right? Whereas years ago, Gordon Petric and Jockey Bjorklund, there is no danger. They're leaving the middle of the park, right? The fullbacks need to defend the full width. So that's obviously the sort of modern variations of this. But I guess as a starting point, mate, I think that'd be good to look at here is how we build the game up, or how we would build the game up.
Yeah, so that's the part I think I find really interesting, because if you think about that complaint that we have so often, and we've seen it again in the final a couple of weeks ago, where you've got Lundstrom and Kamara, and they both want to come and stand here. I'm using Raskin as the example, but they both want to come and stand here and take the ball, but then almost make themselves redundant, and then it drags the rest of the team back. If we have this kind of setup, and Suter and Davies almost mimic that, I guess, and that they're the ones that will have the ball and they're the ones that will bring it out and draw the opposition press. So if they're sort of acting as de facto defensive midfielders in possession and build up, whatever you want to call it, to sort of draw the strikers out and then be able to pick the holes and get the passes through to Kent, etc. I think that, like you said, that completely changes how we play. There'll be a trade-off, absolutely, but it changes how we play, and it might negate that need for that solidity in the middle of the park that we know all three managers in recent times have really loved, with those sort of two controlling midfielders. Also, like you said, they can go laterally as well, and they'll be absolutely more than comfortable out there on the touchlines covering. It will then give the fullbacks that support, I guess, because they know they're going to have on each side, they're going to have two people covering. It used to be a defensive midfielder that would cover and Goldson, and now it's Goldson and Suter as centre backs. So they sort of have that comfort again that they can get that little bit further forward in there. What then I think it does, Ali, like we said, is it gives that opportunity to build, and it means we get rid of a defensive midfielder. What would that mean then for a sort of midfield three? This is the midfield three that everyone is crying out for. Every time I open Twitter or anything, anyone's commenting on anything, it's how can we get Raskin, Cantwell and Tillman in the team. Based on the current structure, I'd be very surprised, as in the one that we're using just now, I'd be very surprised if it happens loads of times. To me, this is very similar to what we've spoken about before with a controlling midfielder and a Rebo and Arfield, or a controlling midfielder and Lawrence and Tillman, as it was at the start of this season. So I'd be very surprised if it happens very, 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 very regularly in the four at the back setup. But in this type of setup, if we assume this, because you've got that structure on this side, Ali, and because you've got the fullbacks there as well, offering that support on these sides, does that, to your mind, depending on what the opposition do, but does that, to your mind, make this little group in here, give them a little bit more freedom, give them a little bit less responsibility, I guess, off the ball, to allow them to be those ball players and get the ball forward that we're looking for?
I think so. I mean, if you look at Beale, I guess if you take his fundamentals as a manager, I definitely don't think he's wedded to a formation, although perhaps what we've saw in the games would somewhat suggest that there has been a fluctuation, right, between the Diamond 4, a 4-3-3, 4-2-3-1. So there's been enough I've saw anyway that would suggest that he's not married to a set formation like a Dyche would be, or a Mourinho or whoever. So I don't think he's a pragmatist in that sense. What it's evident he does want, though, is ball players in midfield, which is obviously music to our ears. That's brilliant. But I guess the realities of this are now, if you're going to have these three guys in midfield, it perhaps takes away now the necessity for all three of those, or certainly two of those three, to make forward penetrative runs. Right? Because you're going to need them all three to work together, both in possession to combine with each other and keep the strikers high, but in transition, that when the ball turns over, you're going to need the three of them to pretty much defend the width of the field, like a traditional Beale midfield or Gerrard midfield would, where you'd have Jack and Kamara, covering the sides. You're going to need two of these three lads to do that as well. So I guess the next piece to that would be is the wide players now need to do more to cut inside. We've saw that a little bit from Tavernier at the weekend. We've saw a lot from Yilmaz making those diagonal movements, and I know we'll get there. But I guess for me, it's you look at like Cantwell, Tillman, Raskin midfield and think, geez, that's three creative players. But we are using our interpretation, or certainly our perception of that, through the current formation, what they're currently doing. So if we were to shift to this, they wouldn't do what they're doing now. They couldn't, or you would basically be left with a back three and Raskin, and then all the best in transition lads deal with that one, And I just don't think that's a Beale trait either. I think he is probably more defensive than we give him credit for, certainly in transition, and that protecting those central spaces is going to remain key, a core part of whatever we do as a team.
Yeah. So I guess my view on that kind of control piece is, I always think it's a little bit negated. I always think it's interesting because it seems to be more about the player rather than the role that they get asked to play. And I guess that probably speaks into your point as well, because I guess the the converse opinion, and there's not many of them about now, but the converse opinion is why maybe why a Jack and Lundstrom have to play together is because they give that sort of defensive security. However, in games that I guess what I should say is I'm maybe proposing that this happens in games that you might not expect. I would say this would be a game where we're maybe playing at home and we've got 60 or 70% possession, and we have that ability. We want to try and draw teams out and get in between them. I'm not talking about big away games or anything like that for this. This would be a very heavy possession thing for me. So in those games, really, how they play out is we end up having Jack and Lundstrom parked outside the opposition box anyway.
Right.
Playing as number 8s or number 10s doesn't work very well because it's not their skill set. They can't really slip the balls through. They don't have that vision. So I guess in my mind, how I'm thinking about this is kind of to what you said there is basically it would be a back three and Raskin patrolling, but then you'd have these guys in possession, not all the time, but in possession, that you'd have them all up here anyway, and you're just getting players that are more comfortable in the final third into the final third, which I think would be really interesting. Appreciate not every game, and there would have to be an element of risk there, but it's certainly a way that I would see that we get more of those players in. The one thing I guess you touched on is it does sort of take an attacker out, although I think what I said there maybe balances that a little bit, in that maybe one of the attackers is just a little bit deeper in the pitch than we thought. However, there would be a bit of a gain then, wouldn't there, Ali, with the fullbacks, because we know basically they play in the opposition half. If we're giving them even more freedom there, they're effectively going to be another 10 yards further forward than where they were. So in that sense, that gives us another two bodies in the final third a little bit more often.
Well, certainly on the left-hand side, right, where, this making those central penetrative runs isn't Borna's game. It is absolutely Yilmaz's, and we've saw that Christ in the, probably cumulative, maybe hour and a bit that he's played for the team. There's not a lot of minutes there, but you can see naturally that he wants to make runs in behind. He wants to take people on, right? He wants to think like a winger would, whereas I think Barisic is your de facto old school fullback, right? And it's of a time, and that fullback obviously still has relevance in today's game. But again, if we're going into a system where even in 4-3-3 it's very narrow, your wide players have to do more than just cross. And I think for the longest time, Tavernier's done all of that, right? He's attacked the back post, he's beat players, he's cut on the inside, he's done so many different things as a fullback. The left, however, has been predominantly the same, right? Because it's obviously been Bournemouth's position for a long time. So I think there's, taking away like a Sakala and build up and just having him be attacking. I think that's what we're doing right now, right? Yeah. So I don't necessarily think that we're, taking away to gain elsewhere, or conversely putting people further back and losing out up front. I just think the ball movements are what they are, right? We're trying to progress one side and attack the other, and it's how we do that, right? It's we're starting to see, even in the short time that we've saw two strikers, that they're playing almost like split forwards, a little bit wider apart.
Yep.
So there's now an ability to make diagonal runs towards the goal rather than this constant central striker that just seems to get swallowed up, especially against three centre backs, right? I mean, it infuriates me that we play Morelos up front himself. You got two guys on him and just constantly wrap balls into his neck every time and expect him to just, on you go, Alfie, go solve it, son. So I think that's the next part of this, that it looks like we're recruiting midfielders to get on the ball, which is brilliant. It looks like we've got two wing backs here, again, regardless of whatever system we play, that have got, ability to play inside now. Again, brilliant. Now we need forwards that can complement that. So whether that's, again, just more quality, as in give them it into feet and they can spin and beat people, whether it's more they're used to playing in a front two, so get the sort of the combinations that go with that. I think that's the final piece of the jigsaw for me now, mate, is that if you look at our forwards, none of them really work together. We've sort of done this weird thing, right, where Sakala and AN other.
Yeah.
But I don't think that's, personally speaking, I don't think it's a long-term solution, because it's quite easily thwarted if we can't get them enough supply.
No, definitely. And I think that's the final point, I guess, that we'll come on to is the attack. But I guess if we just finish off that sort of build-up piece then. So if we imagine that as an attack, I was going to try and make the little arrows work, but I failed miserably, as you probably said a few minutes ago. So I'll just use the ball. But if we think of that as attack, if Davies has progressed the ball forward, the opposition have got themselves back into space. These two are coming out to commit. Davies has the ability, I think, to pass that ball into Cantwell or round to Yilmaz, however he sees fit. You get us into this situation here, and it's the same on the other side. If you can get Cantwell in this situation, you've got Yilmaz, who, like we've said, is very, very comfortable making that run that there's absolutely no chance Barisic just making, because he couldn't imagine touching the ball on his right foot in the opposition final third. Or you've got the pass into Raskin here, or you've got the pass into Kent, who'll be buzzing about. To me, it's very easy to say, and it's based on a very nice, clean build-up, and Raith Rovers doing exactly as you want to do, and I'm sure that's never going to happen. But getting the ball into these positions with these options here would make all of that a little bit better. But you're absolutely spot on. There have been situations that we get the ball into these positions, and whether it's being crowded out, whether it's the striker's first touch, whether it's someone being offside, whether it's just that relationship between the front two or the front three not really working, then things fall down. So this is very, very idealistic, but it's maybe an idea of the back end, if you like, of how we can maybe build up in a better way and have maybe even the fullbacks in a bit more of a cohesive position.
Can I just make one more point, mate, just before we move on here? Can you move Tillman up to the front line and move Suter where Tillman is? All right. So if we look at, and again, these people are interchangeable, right? But if you look at a Beale team, this is what it looks like predominantly, right? In attack, a mid six, a sort of central six with two on the outside. So again, this is the perception we have to have as fans now, is this is what they want to get to. So everything that they're doing, whether it be in build-up, whether it be in formations, whether it be anything, is to get into this situation where you have control, right? He speaks a lot about that, obviously having control of the ball. And I guess it's now on to the players, or certainly the new players that come into it, is how, as a group of six, and then the two on the outside, can they fashion attacks, right? So whether that's putting a ball into wide areas, we've saw a lot more of it where a cross goes in, we recycle the attack, it stays within the sort of final third, and we get a secondary attack from an initial cross. Or more importantly, how can we, again, in these areas here, get interchanging and rotations where a guy's coming off the high line and someone's taking his spot, and not necessarily just always dropping deep to get the ball the whole time. So again, while we've spoke here about the back three, if we look at where Suter's positioned in this shot here, Goldson was in this spot loads of times on the weekend.
I was going to say, people might think this is an exaggeration, but you looking at the average positions of the players for the time Goldson was on the park, he was in the opposition's half, and he was ahead of Lundstrom, so it's not that far from reality in some of these games. Right,
and again, this is the part of it. Do you want Goldson in a creative midfield position? Of course you don't, right? But the flip side of that is that the minute we lose the ball, he instantly becomes a centre back, and right away you've got a 2-for-1 there, right? You've got a guy doing, two spots pretty well, but obviously you've then got the added caveat that in defensive transition you've got good, a player that can drop in and obviously defend 1v1, defend the back line, just the same.
And this is I guess, the overlapping centre half concept, isn't it, from Sheffield United? It's maybe not going to be as sort of structured or as effective as that, but it is that sort of route, I guess, where you're trying to find someone else who can come in and disrupt the opposition structure. We sort of seen it with Tavernier a couple of years ago, coming in at the back post, etc. But just another body to come in, and then to the point of the video, if Suter is doing that in certain situations, you've kind of still got two that are back here should anything happen, and he'll still be able to come back and cover, or you've got Raskin who can come back as well. So there is that flexibility in there too. I guess that point we mentioned about the forward line, I think looking at what we've spoken about here, I think obviously I don't have much debate about Davies, Goldson, and Suter as kind of a back three as players. I had a bit of a query around Suter if he was coming in as a Goldson replacement in a back four. Then wasn't sure he was 100% at that level. Obviously, he's had his injury problems. We'll see how he goes. But in a back three in these games, I don't think there would be any issue whatsoever. Obviously, we know Raskin, Cantwell and Tillman have played very well. There's obviously a question mark about whether Tillman will be here next year, but I guess in theory, someone like Lawrence could fill in that position and do something slightly similar. Tavernier, there probably is quite a debate around, but I think it would be very unlikely if he was to move on in the summer, or if we signed someone who was deposing him immediately. Yilmaz, I guess there probably is a bit of debate again, injury-wise. Is he going to come in and be first pick? I would err on the side of yes there. But the front two is probably the biggest debate, Ali, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that because, like we've said there, it needs to be a partnership. It needs to be not just two number nines. It needs to be players that are comfortable back to goal, but also players that can move teams about, can beat a man, are comfortable one-on-one, are comfortable interchanging, quick passing, movement, etc. It's a tricky thing to get to. We know if Kent stays, Kent will play. I don't think there's any doubt about that. We know we have seen him in this sort of number 10-ish position behind one or two strikers in the past. What would you be looking for here? Whether it's from Kent and Cholak, or whether it's from Kent and another, or whether it's from two others, what would you be looking for here in a sort of 3-5-2 in these sort of possession-heavy games that would allow us to break teams apart a bit more?
I think the one thing we're definitely missing in attack is someone that can attack against a stationary defence, right? And I know that sounds fairly rudimentary because every team in the world wants that player. But what I mean by that is, if we take Cholak, for example, Cholak's very, very good at attacking in transition. So again, a lot of his goals come from the back line was once defending 30 yards from their goal, attacks happened, and he finds space as the back line drops, right? So his ability to find the front post from a crossing situation, or a through ball in behind, or even a diagonal ball from deep, and finding headers in the box. Again, if you look online, you'll see a lot of his goals happen in transition. So if we think of how many times that happens at Ibrox, I mean, you could probably count in one hand, right? Their teams are defending predominantly inside their box. So it's having a forward that can, again, the easy route a lot of coaches go down is, all right, we'll sign a big lad, we'll sign somebody at 6'5" who can win headers and, attack the balls in the box. But as we know, we need to be more than that because we're going to have possession. So if you can find a Peter Crouch out there who's a great footballer and is 6'5", he's probably not coming to Scotland, right? So this is the trade-off, and the problem not necessarily the problem, but the tough part about finding a striker in this system is it's someone that isn't scared to get physical, and by that I mean attack the ball inside the box. For as good as Alfie is as a sort of power striker, and I've never really felt confident he's going to get above a defender and power one in. No. So, and I think we somewhat tried it when E10 was there. Again, the poor lad just never got a run of games to really show us, and then when he did, his time was probably up at the club. So I think going down that road again of having someone that's good in the air but can play against stationary defences, I think is definitely what we need. And then you can then add into that players like Sakala that can come off the bench, right? Or in games where, like I say, you're playing against a high defensive line and he's going to get joy in behind. But play him in those matches. We don't need to have a set 11 every week, but what we do need is players that can play in different games and can complement each other. And like I say, right now, I just think we're one short that complements the rest. You know what I mean?
No, definitely. I think an important point that maybe gets overlooked as well is that other changes that get made. So these changes were magically made for the game at the weekend. It can then bring out the best in other players, and it may not necessarily be something that we know, that the manager knows, or anything. It can just be those sort of miraculous marginal gains or intangibles. I mean, I've kind of got an idea in my head of Yilmaz going down that line and kind of whipping in across for Cholak to score. Kind of similar to how he scored against Hibs when Sakala whipped that across. Cholak makes the run to the near post. I can see that goal happening. It's not a goal we score very often. Similar when if you've got Yilmaz hitting the line or Tavernier hitting the byline because they're a little bit further forward, cutting it back for Kent to score a tap in. When's the last time Kent was in a situation to score a tap in. Actually, I know when the last time was, it was Seville, so we'll quickly skip that one. Not the best note to end on, but yeah, hopefully the point still stands. But it's those sort of things, I guess. If we break that apart and we attack in a different way, then I guess opportunities can come to players in situations that they might not have been in before, and it might help them increase that 10% as well.
Spot on. Like I say, right now we're asking Čolak to do something that he's not very good at, which is lead the line as a number 9, drop in, link play, and work with 2, narrow wingers next to him. I guarantee he's never done that before in his career. Now that's, again, it's a pro footballer. They're training every day. There's all those, things there you could say. But if we're setting our players up for success, we got to remember, he was signed under a different manager to play in a different formation. We're going to have to sign players that can play in this one. And even if it's, sitting a lad down and saying, here's the 3 and 4 things that I need you to work on at training, which I'm sure has happened, right? Yeah. But when you hear him say things like, I like Čolak's energy, I like the way he presses, I like the way he gets after it, I think they're good things that you're hearing a manager that's enthused by a player. What I would hate for Čolak is that he gets sort of, all these, examples of being like a Boyd. I mean, we're bad as a support for comparing people, and I'm bad as a person. But this lad's way more than that. But we have to find a way to get out of him. And I think having him do it himself up there,
not happening.
Again, it just isn't, for me anyway, just isn't the best way forward. I just think he needs help.
No, absolutely. I think you're 100% spot on. Okay, so that 15-20 minute video that we were doing turned into the best part of 45 minutes. So it's not really Tactics Talk Bitesize anymore, but I think having the Tactics pad obviously helped to illustrate that. Ali, thank you very much for joining me once again.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks a lot.
And thank you all for watching. As you can see from the ticker, if you haven't signed up, you can sign up at heartandhand.co.uk/Patreon. You'll hear more from myself and Ali on there on Tactics Talk. And obviously there's hundreds of other podcasts that you can listen to every week. We'll be back with another bite size, hopefully a little bit shorter when something else comes up that we think is interesting. But thank you once again.
This is a Heart and Hand production.